Hey everybody, these are chapters 3 and 4, so if you've missed 1 and 2, I'll put them down in the description, but otherwise, enjoy. Chapter 3, The Doom of Draenor. Kil'jaeden and the Shadow Pact, Duskwood, Scholomance, Stratholme. Around the time of Medivh's birth on Azeroth, Kil'jaeden and the Deceiver sat and brooded amongst his followers within the Twisting Nether. The cunning demon lord, under orders of his master, Sargeras, was plotting the Burning Legion's second invasion of Azeroth. This time, he would not allow any mistakes. Kil'jaeden surmised that he needed a new force to weaken Azeroth's defenses before the Legion even set foot upon the world. If the mortal races, such as the Night Elves and Dragons, were forced to contend with a new threat, they would be too weak to pose any real resistance when the Legion's true invasion arrived. It was at this time that Kil'jaeden discovered the lush world of Draenor floating peacefully within the Great Dark Beyond. Home to the shamanistic, clan-based orcs and the peaceful Draenei, Draenor was as idyllic as it was vast. The noble orc clans roamed the open prairies and hunted for sport, while the inquisitive Draenei built crude cities within the world's towering cliffs and peaks. Kil'jaeden knew that Draenor's denizens had great potential to serve the Burning Legion if they could be cultivated properly. Of the two races, Kil'jaeden saw that the warrior orcs were more susceptible to the Legion's corruption. He enthralled the elder orc shaman, Ner'zhul, in much the same way that Sargeras brought Queen Azshara under his control in ages past. Using the cunning shaman as his conduit, the demons spread battle lust and savagery throughout the orc clans. Before long, the spiritual race was transformed into a bloodthirsty people. Kil'jaeden then urged Ner'zhul and his people to take the last step, to give themselves over entirely to the pursuit of death and war. Yet the old shaman, sensing that his people would be enslaved to hatred forever, somehow resisted the demon's command. Frustrated by Ner'zhul's resistance, Kil'jaeden searched for another orc who would deliver his people into the Legion's hands. The clever demon lord finally found the willing disciple he sought, Ner'zhul's ambitious apprentice, Gul'dan. Kil'jaeden promised Gul'dan untold power in exchange for his utter obedience. The young orc became an avid student of demonic magic and developed into the most powerful mortal warlock in history. He taught other young orcs the arcane arts and strove to eradicate the orc shamanistic traditions. Gul'dan showed a new brand of magic to his brethren, a terrible new power that reeked of doom. Kil'jaeden, seeking to tighten his hold over the orcs, helped Gul'dan found the Shadow Council, a secretive sect that manipulated the clans and spread the use of warlock magics throughout Draenor. As more and more orcs began to wield warlock magics, the gentle fields and streams of Draenor began to blacken and fade. Over time, the vast prairies the orcs had called home for generations withered away, leaving only red, barren soil. The demon energies were slowly killing the world. Chapter 3, The Doom of Draenor. Kil'jaeden and the Shadow Pact, Duskwood, Scholomance, Stratholme. Around the time of Medivh's birth on Azeroth, Kil'jaeden and the Deceiver sat and brooded amongst his followers within the Twisting Nether. The cunning demon lord, under orders of his master, Sargeras, was plotting the Burning Legion's second invasion of Azeroth. This time, he would not allow any mistakes. Kil'jaeden surmised that he needed a new force to weaken Azeroth's defenses before the Legion even set foot upon the world. If the mortal races, such as the Night Elves and Dragons, were forced to contend with a new threat, they would be too weak to pose any real resistance when the Legion's true invasion arrived. It was at this time that Kil'jaeden discovered the lush world of Draenor floating peacefully within the Great Dark Beyond. Home to the shamanistic, clan-based orcs and the peaceful Draenei, Draenor was as idyllic as it was vast. The noble orc clans roamed the open prairies and hunted for sport, while the inquisitive Draenei built crude cities within the world's towering cliffs and peaks. Kil'jaeden knew that Draenor's denizens had great potential to serve the Burning Legion if they could be cultivated properly. Of the two races, Kil'jaeden saw that the warrior orcs were more susceptible to the Legion's corruption. He enthralled the elder orc shaman, Ner'zhul, in much the same way that Sargeras brought Queen Azshara under his control in ages past. Using the cunning shaman as his conduit, the demons spread battle lust and savagery throughout the orc clans. Before long, the spiritual race was transformed into a bloodthirsty people. Kil'jaeden then urged Ner'zhul and his people to take the last step, to give themselves over entirely to the pursuit of death and war. Yet the old shaman, sensing that his people would be enslaved to hatred forever, somehow resisted the demon's command. Frustrated by Ner'zhul's resistance, Kil'jaeden searched for another orc who would deliver his people into the Legion's hands. The clever demon lord finally found the willing disciple he sought, Ner'zhul's ambitious apprentice, Gul'dan. Kil'jaeden promised Gul'dan untold power in exchange for his utter obedience. The young orc became an avid student of demonic magic and developed into the most powerful mortal warlock in history. He taught other young orcs the arcane arts and strove to eradicate the orc shamanistic traditions. Gul'dan showed a new brand of magic to his brethren, a terrible new power that reeked of doom. Kil'jaeden, seeking to tighten his hold over the orcs, helped Gul'dan found the Shadow Council, a secretive sect that manipulated the clans and spread the use of warlock magics throughout Draenor. As more and more orcs began to wield warlock magics, the gentle fields and streams of Draenor began to blacken and fade. Over time, the vast prairies the orcs had called home for generations withered away, leaving only red, barren soil. The demon energies were slowly killing the world. Rise of the Horde. Swamp of Sorrows, Ironforge, Durotar. The orcs became increasingly aggressive under the secret control of Gul'dan and his Shadow Council. They constructed massive arenas where the orcs honored their warrior skills in trials of combat and death. During this period, a few clan chieftains spoke out against the growing depravity in their race. One such chieftain, Durotan of the Frostwolf clan, warned against the orcs losing themselves to hate and fury. His words fell on deaf ears, however, as stronger chieftains such as Grom Hellscream of the Warsong clan stepped forward to champion the new age of warfare and dominance. Kil'jaeden knew that the orc clans were almost ready, but he needed to be certain of their ultimate loyalty. In secret, he had the Shadow Council summon Manaroth the Destructor, the living vessel of destruction and rage. Gul'dan called the clan chieftains together and convinced them that drinking Manaroth's raging blood would make them utterly invincible. Led by Grom Hellscream, all the clan chiefs except Durotan drank and thereby sealed their fates as slaves to the Burning Legion. Empowered by Manaroth's rage, the chieftains unwittingly extended this subjugation to their unsuspecting brethren. Consumed with the curse of this new bloodlust, the orcs sought to unleash their fury on any who stood before them. Sensing that the time had come, Gul'dan united the warring clans into a single unstoppable horde. However, knowing that the various chieftains like Hellscream and Orgrim Doomhammer would vie for overall supremacy, Gul'dan set up a puppet war chief to rule over this new horde. Blackhand the Destroyer, a particularly depraved and vicious orc warlord, was chosen to be Gul'dan's puppet. Under Blackhand's command, the horde set out to test itself against the simple Draenei. Over the course of a few months, the horde eradicated nearly every Draenei living on Draenor. Only a scattered handful of survivors managed to evade the orcs' awesome wrath. Flushed with victory, Gul'dan reveled in the horde's power and might. Still, he knew that without any enemies to fight, the horde would consume itself with endless infighting in its unstoppable appetite for glorious slaughter. Kil'jaeden knew that the horde was finally prepared. The orcs had become the Burning Legion's greatest weapon. The cunning demon shared his knowledge with his waiting master, and Sargeras agreed that the time of his revenge had finally come. Chapter 4. The Alliance and Horde. The Dark Portal and the Fall of Stormwind. Blasted Lands, Swamp of Sorrows, Red Ridge Mountains, Stormwind City, Skullomance. As Kil'jaeden prepared the Horde for its invasion of Azeroth, Medivh continued to fight for his soul against Sargeras. King Lane, the noble monarch of Stormwind, grew wary of the darkness which seemed to taint the spirit of his former friend. King Lane shared his concerns with Anduin Lothar, the last descendant of the Arathi bloodline, whom he named his lieutenant-at-arms. Even so, neither man could have imagined that Medivh's slow descent into madness would bring about the horrors that were to come. As a final incentive, Sargeras promised to bestow great power upon Gul'dan if he agreed to lead the Horde to Azeroth. Through Medivh, Sargeras told the warlock that he could become a living god if he found the undersea tomb where the guardian Eowyn had placed Sargeras' crippled body nearly 1,000 years before. Gul'dan agreed and decided that once the denizens of Azeroth were beaten, he would find the legendary tomb and claim his reward. Assured that the Horde would serve his purposes, Sargeras ordered the invasion to begin. Through a joint effort, Medivh and the warlocks of the Shadow Council opened the dimensional gateway known as the Dark Portal. This portal bridged the distance between Azeroth and Draenor, and it was large enough that armies might pass through it. Gul'dan dispatched orc scouts through the portal to survey the lands which they would conquer. The returning scouts assured the Shadow Council that the world of Azeroth was ripe for the taking. Still convinced that Gul'dan's corruption would destroy his people, Durotan spoke out against the warlocks once more. The brave warrior claimed that warlocks were destroying the purity of the orcish spirit, and that his reckless invasion would be their doom. Gul'dan, unable to risk killing such a popular hero, was forced to exile Durotan and his Frostwolf clan into the far reaches of the world. After the exiled Frostwolves charged through the portal, only a few orc clans followed. These orcs quickly set up a base of operations within the Black Morass, a dark and swampy area far to the east of the Kingdom of Stormwind. As the orcs began to branch out and explore the new lands, they came into immediate conflict with the human defenders of Stormwind. Though these skirmishes usually ended quickly, they did much to illustrate the weaknesses and strengths of both rival species. Lane and Lothar were never able to gather accurate data of the orcs' numbers and could only guess at how great a force they would have to contend with. After a few years, the majority of the orcish horde had crossed into Azeroth, and Gul'dan deemed that the time for the primary strike against humanity had come. The horde launched its full might against the unsuspecting Kingdom of Stormwind. As the forces of Azeroth and the horde clashed across the kingdom, internal conflicts began to take their toll on both armies. King Lane, who believed the bestial orcs to be incapable of conquering Azeroth, contemptuously held his position at his capital of Stormwind. However, Sir Lothar became convinced that the battle should be taken directly to the enemy, and he was forced to choose between his convictions and his loyalty to the king. Choosing to follow his instincts, Lothar stormed Medivh's tower fortress of Karazhan with the help of the wizard's young apprentice, Khadgar. Khadgar and Lothar succeeded in vanquishing the possessed guardian, whom they confirmed to be the source of the conflict. By killing Medivh's body, Lothar and the young apprentice inadvertently banished the spirit of Sargeras to the abyss. As a consequence, the pure, virtuous spirit of Medivh was also allowed to live on, and wander the astral plane for many years to come. Although Medivh had been defeated, the Horde continued to dominate the defenders of Stormwind. As the Horde's victory drew nearer, Orgrim Doomhammer, one of the greatest orc chieftains, began to see the depraved corruption that had spread throughout the clans since their time in Draenor. His old comrade, Durotan, returned from exile and warned him yet again of Gul'dan's treachery. In speedy retribution, Gul'dan's assassins murdered Durotan and his family, leaving only his infant son alive. Unknown to Doomhammer was the fact that Durotan's infant son was found by the human officer, Adelis Blackmore, and taken as a slave. That infant orc would one day rise to become the greatest leader his people would ever know. Incensed by Durotan's death, Orgrim set out to free the Horde from demonic corruption and ultimately assumed the role of war chief of the Horde by killing Gul'dan's corrupt puppet, Blackhand. Under his decisive leadership, the relentless Horde finally laid siege to Stormwind Keep. King Lane had severely underestimated the might of the Horde, and he watched helplessly as his kingdom fell to the green-skinned invaders. Ultimately, King Lane was assassinated by one of the Shadow Council's finest killers, the half-orc Garona. Lothar and his warriors, returning home from Karazhan, hoped to stem the loss of life and save their once glorious homeland. Instead, they returned too late and found their beloved kingdom in smoking ruins. The orcish horde continued to ravage the countryside and claim the surrounding lands for its own. Forced into hiding, Lothar and his companions swore a grim oath to reclaim their homeland at any cost. Aftermath of the Second War. Blasted Lands, Stormwind City, Scarlet Monastery, Darnassus. The devastating Second War against the Orcish Horde left the Alliance of Lordaeron in a state of shock and disarray. The bloodthirsty orcs, led by the mighty war chief Orgrim Doomhammer, not only smashed their way through the dwarf-held lands of Cosmodan, but had razed many of Lordaeron's central provinces as well. The unrelenting orcs even succeeded in ravaging the elves' remote kingdom of Kel'Thalas before their rampage was finally stopped. The Alliance armies, led by Sir Anduin Lothar, Uther the Lightbringer, and Admiral Dalen Proudmoore, pushed the orcs south into the shattered land of Azeroth, the first kingdom to fall before the orcs' ruthless onslaught. The Alliance forces under Sir Lothar managed to push Doomhammer's clans out of Lordaeron and back into their orc-controlled lands of Azeroth. Lothar's forces surrounded the orcs' volcanic citadel of Blackrock Spire and laid siege to their defenses. In a last-ditch effort, Doomhammer and his lieutenants staged a daring charge from the spire and clashed with Lothar's paladins in the center of the burning steppes. Doomhammer and Lothar squared off in a titanic battle that left both mighty combatants battered and drained. Though Doomhammer narrowly succeeded in vanquishing Lothar, the great hero's death did not have the effect the war chief had hoped for. Turalyon, Lothar's most trusted lieutenant, took up Lothar's blood-stained shield and rallied his grief-stricken brethren for a vicious counterattack. Under the ragged standard of both Lordaeron and Azeroth, Turalion's troops slaughtered the bulk of Doomhammer's remaining forces in a glorious but terrible rout. There was nothing left for the ragged, scattered Orc survivors but to flee to the last standing bastion of Orcish power, the Dark Portal. Turalion and his warriors chased the remaining Orcs through the festering Swamp of Sorrows and into the corrupted Blasted Lands where the Dark Portal stood. There, at the foot of the colossal portal, the broken Horde and the rugged Alliance clashed in what would be the last, bloodiest battle of the Second War. Outnumbered and driven mad by the curse of their bloodlust, the Orcs inevitably fell before the wrath of the Alliance. Doomhammer was taken prisoner and escorted to Lordaeron, where his broken clans were rounded up and hauled north, back to Lordaeron. Beyond the Dark Portal, Stranglethorn Vale, Blasted Lands, Stormwind City, Scarlet Monastery. Only a few months after Netherguard's completion, the energies of the Dark Portal coalesced and opened up a new gateway to Draenor. The remaining Orc clans, under the leadership of the Elder Shaman, Ner'zhul, charged forth into Azeroth once again. Intent on stealing a number of magical artifacts that would increase Ner'zhul's power, the Orcs planned to open up new portals in Draenor that would allow them to escape their doomed Red World forever. Convinced that Ner'zhul was planning a new offensive against the Alliance, King Tyrannus of Lordaeron sent his armies into Draenor to end the Orcish threat once and for all. Led by Khadgar and General Turalion, the Alliance forces clashed with the Orcs across the burning landscape. Even with the aid of the Elven Ranger Illyria, the dwarf Kurdran, and the veteran soldier Danath, Khadgar was unable to prevent Ner'zhul from opening his portals to other worlds. The tremendous magical storm caused by the portal's converging energies began to tear the ravaged world apart. Ner'zhul, followed only by his most trusted servants, managed to escape through one of the portals as Khadgar fought desperately to return his comrades to Azeroth. Realizing that they would be trapped on the dying world, Khadgar and his companions selflessly decided to destroy the Dark Portal so that Azeroth would not be harmed by Draenor's violent destruction. By all accounts, the heroes were successful in destroying the portal and saving Azeroth, but whether or not they escaped the death throes of Draenor remains to be seen. The invasion of Draenor. Scholomance. As the fires of the Second War died down, the Alliance took aggressive steps to contain the Orcish threat. A number of large internment camps, meant to house the captive Orcs, were constructed in southern Lordaeron. Guarded by both the paladins and the veteran soldiers of the Alliance, the camps proved to be a great success. Though the captive Orcs were tense and anxious to do battle once more, the various camp wardens, based at the old prison fortress of Durnhold, kept the peace and maintained a strong semblance of order. However, on the hellish world of Draenor, a new Orcish army prepared to strike at the unsuspecting Alliance. Ner'zhul, the former mentor of Gul'dan, rallied the remaining Orc clans under his dark banner. Aided by the Shadowmoon clan, the old shaman planned to open a number of portals on Draenor that would lead the Horde to new, unspoiled worlds. To power his new portals, he needed a number of enchanted artifacts from Azeroth. To procure them, Ner'zhul reopened the Dark Portal and sent his ravenous servants charging through it. The new Horde, led by veteran chieftains such as Grom Hellscream and Kilrog Deadeye of the Bleeding Hollow clan, surprised the Alliance defense forces and rampaged through the countryside. Under Ner'zhul's surgical command, the Orcs quickly rounded up the artifacts that they needed and fled back to the safety of Draenor. King Tyrannus of Lordaeron, convinced that the Orcs were preparing a new invasion of Azeroth, assembled his most trusted lieutenants. He ordered General Turalion and the Archmage Khadgar to lead an expedition through the Dark Portal to put an end to the Orcish threat once and for all. Turalion and Khadgar's forces marched into Draenor and repeatedly clashed with Ner'zhul's clans upon the ravaged Hellfire Peninsula. Even with the aid of the High Elf Illyria Windrunner, the dwarf Kurdran Wildhammer, and the veteran soldier Danath Trollbane, Khadgar was unable to prevent Ner'zhul from opening his portals to other worlds. Ner'zhul finally opened his portals to other worlds, but he did not foresee the terrible price he would pay. The portal's tremendous energies began to tear the very fabric of Draenor apart. As Turalion's forces fought desperately to return home to Azeroth, the world of Draenor began to buckle in upon itself. Grom Hellscream and Kilrog Deadeye, realizing that Ner'zhul's mad plans would doom their entire race, rallied the remaining Orcs and escaped back to the relative safety of Azeroth. On Draenor, Turalion and Khadgar agreed to make the ultimate sacrifice by destroying the Dark Portal from their side. Though it would cost their lives, and the lives of their companions, they knew that it was the only way to ensure Azeroth's survival. Even as Hellscream and Deadeye hacked their way through the human ranks in a desperate bid for freedom, the dark portal exploded behind them. For them, and the remaining orcs on Azeroth, there would be no going back. Ner'zhul and his loyal Shadowmoon clan passed through the largest of the newly created portals as massive volcanic eruptions began to break Draenor's continents apart. The burning seas rose up and roiled the shattered landscape as the tortured world was finally consumed in a massive apocalyptic explosion. The birth of the Lich King, Duskwood, Hillsbrad Foothills, Skolamance, Stratholme. Ner'zhul and his followers entered the Twisting Nether, the ethereal plane that connects all of the worlds scattered throughout the Great Dark Beyond. Unfortunately, Kil'jaeden and his demonic minions were waiting for them. Kil'jaeden, who had sworn to take vengeance on Ner'zhul for his prideful defiance, slowly tore the old shaman's body apart, piece by piece. Kil'jaeden kept the shaman's spirit alive and intact, thus leaving Ner'zhul painfully aware of his body's gross dismemberment. Though Ner'zhul pleaded with the demon to release his spirit and grant him death, the demon grimly replied that the blood pact they had made long ago was still binding and that Ner'zhul still had a purpose to serve. The orcs' failure to conquer the world for the Burning Legion forced Kil'jaeden to create a new army to sow chaos throughout the kingdoms of Azeroth. This new army could not be allowed to fall prey to the same petty rivalries and infighting that had plagued the Horde. It would have to be merciless and single-minded in its mission. This time, Kil'jaeden could not afford to fail. Holding Ner'zhul's spirit helpless in stasis, Kil'jaeden gave him one last chance to serve the Legion or suffer eternal torment. Once again, Ner'zhul recklessly agreed to the demon's pact. Ner'zhul's spirit was placed within a specially crafted block of diamond-hard ice gathered from the far reaches of the Twisting Nether. Encased within the frozen cask, Ner'zhul felt his consciousness expand 10,000-fold. Warped by the demon's chaotic powers, Ner'zhul became a spectral being of unfathomable power. At that moment, the orc known as Ner'zhul was shattered forever, and the Lich King was born. Ner'zhul's loyal Death Knights and Shadowmoon followers were also transformed by the demon's chaotic energies. The wicked spellcasters were ripped apart and remade as skeletal liches. The demons had ensured that even in death, Ner'zhul's followers would serve him unquestioningly. When the time was right, Kil'jaeden explained the mission for which he had created the Lich King. Ner'zhul was to spread a plague of death and terror across Azeroth that would snuff out human civilization forever. All those who died from the dreaded plague would arise as the undead, and their spirits would be bound to Ner'zhul's iron will forever. Kil'jaeden promised that if Ner'zhul accomplished his dark mission of scouring humanity from the world, he would be freed from his curse and granted a new, healthy body to inhabit. Though Ner'zhul was agreeable and seemingly anxious to play his part, Kil'jaeden remained skeptical of his pawn's loyalties. Keeping the Lich King bodiless and trapped within the crystal cask assured his good conduct for the short term, but the demon knew that he would need to keep a watchful eye on him. To end this, Kil'jaeden called upon his elite demon guard, the vampiric dreadlords, to police Ner'zhul and ensure that he accomplished his dread task. Tichondrius, the most powerful and cunning of the dreadlords, warmed to the challenge. He was fascinated by the plague's severity and the Lich King's unbridled potential for genocide. Icecrown and the Frozen Throne, Elwyn Forest, Scarlet Monastery, Skolamance, Undercity, Stratholme. Kil'jaeden cast Ner'zhul's icy cask back into the world of Azeroth. The hardened crystal streaked across the night sky and smashed into the desolate Arctic continent of Northrend, burying itself deep within the ice-crowned glacier. The frozen crystal, warped and scarred by its violent descent, came to resemble a throne, and Ner'zhul's vengeful spirit soon stirred within it. From the confines of the frozen throne, Ner'zhul began to reach out his vast consciousness and touch the minds of Northrend's native inhabitants. With little effort, he enslaved the minds of many indigenous creatures, including ice trolls and fierce wendigo, and he drew their evil brethren into his growing shadow. His psychic powers proved to be almost limitless, and he used them to create a small army that he housed within Icecrown's twisting labyrinths. As the Lich King mastered his growing abilities under the Dreadlord's persistent vigil, he discovered a remote human settlement on the fringe of the vast Dragonblight. On a whim, Ner'zhul decided to test his powers on the unsuspecting humans. Ner'zhul cast a plague of undeath, which had originated from deep within the frozen throne, out into the Arctic wasteland. Controlling the plague with his will alone, he drove it straight into a human village. Within 3 days, everyone in the settlement was dead, but shortly thereafter, the dead villagers began to rise as zombified corpses. Ner'zhul could feel their individual spirits and thought as if they were his own. The raging cacophony in his mind caused Ner'zhul to grow even more powerful, as if their spirits provided him with much-needed nourishment. He found it was child's play to control the zombies' actions and steer them to whatever end he wished. Over the following months, Ner'zhul continued to experiment with his plague of undeath by subjugating every human inhabitant of Northrend. With his army of undead growing daily, he knew that the time for his true test was nearing. The Battle of Grim Batal, Stormwind City, Ironforge, Wetlands, Mulgore. Meanwhile, in the war-torn lands of the south, the scattered remnants of the Horde fought for their very survival. Though Grom Helmscream and his Warsong clan managed to evade capture, Deadeye and his Bleeding Hollow clan were rounded up and placed in the internment camps in Lordaeron. Notwithstanding these costly uprisings, the camp's wardens soon re-established control over their brutish charges. However, unknown to the Alliance, a large force of orcs still roamed free in the northern wastes of Cosmodan. The Dragonmaw clan, led by the infamous warlock Nekros, was using an ancient artifact known as the Demon Soul to control the Dragon Queen Alexstrasza and her Dragonflight. With the Dragon Queen as his hostage, Nekros built up a secret army within the abandoned, some say cursed, Wildhammer stronghold of Grim Batal. Planning to unleash his forces and the mighty red dragons on the Alliance, Nekros hoped to reunite the Horde and continue its conquest of Azeroth. His vision did not come to pass. A small group of resistance fighters, led by the human mage Ronin, managed to destroy the Demon Soul and free the Dragon Queen from Nekros' command. In their fury, Alexstrasza's dragons tore Grim Batal apart and incinerated the greater bulk of the Dragonmaw clan. Nekros' grand schemes of reunification came crashing down as the Alliance troops rounded up the remaining orc survivors and threw them into the waiting internment camps. The Dragonmaw clan's defeat signaled the end of the Horde, and the end of the orcs' furious bloodlust. Lethargy of the Orcs, Elwyn Forest, the Barrens. Months passed, and more orc prisoners were rounded up and placed within the internment camps. As the camps began to overflow, the Alliance was forced to construct new camps in the plains south of the Alterac Mountains. To properly maintain and supply the growing number of camps, King Tyrannus levied a new tax on the Alliance nations. This tax, along with increased political tensions over border disputes, created widespread unrest. It seemed that the fragile pact that had forged the human nations together in their darkest hour would break at any given moment. Amidst the political turmoil, many of the camp wardens began to notice an unsettling change come over their orc captives. The orcs' efforts to escape from the camps or even fight amongst themselves had greatly decreased in frequency over time. The orcs were becoming increasingly aloof and lethargic. Though it was difficult to believe, the orcs, once held as the most aggressive race ever seen on Azeroth, had completely lost their will to fight. The strange lethargy confounded the Alliance leaders and continued to take its toll on the rapidly weakening orcs. Some speculated that some strange disease, contractable only by orcs, brought about the baffling lethargy. But Archmage Anthonidas of Dalaran posed a different hypothesis. Researching what he could find of orcish history, Antonidas learned that the orcs had been under crippling influences of demonic power for generations. He speculated that the orcs had been corrupted by these powers even before the first invasion of Azeroth. Clearly, demons had spiked the orcs' blood, and in turn, the brutes had been granted unnaturally heightened strength, endurance, and aggression. Antonidas theorized that the orcs' communal lethargy was not actually a disease, but a consequence of racial withdrawal from the volatile warlock magics that had made them the fearsome, bloodlusted warriors. Though the symptoms were clear, Antonidas was unable to find a cure for the orcs' present condition. Then, too, many of his fellow mages, as well as a few notable Alliance leaders, argued that finding a cure for the orcs would be an imprudent venture. Left to ponder the orcs' mysterious condition, Antonidas' conclusion was that the orcs' cure would have to be a spiritual one. The New Horde, Swamp of Sorrows, Stormwind City, the Barrens. The chief warden of the internment camps, Aedalis Blackmore, watched over the captive orcs from his prison stronghold, Durnhold. One orc in particular had always held his interest, the orphaned infant he found nearly 18 years before. Blackmore had raised the young male as a favored slave and named him Thrall. Blackmore taught the orc about tactics, philosophy, and combat. Thrall was even trained as a gladiator. All the while, the corrupt wardens sought to mold the orc into a weapon. Despite his harsh upbringing, young Thrall grew into a strong, quick-witted orc, and he knew in his heart that a slave's life was not for him. As he grew to maturity, he learned about his people, the orcs, whom he had never met. After their defeat, most of them had been placed in internment camps. Rumor had it that Doomhammer, the orc leader, had escaped from Lordaeron and gone into hiding. Only one rogue clan still operated in secret, trying to evade the watchful eye of the Alliance. The resourceful yet inexperienced Thrall decided to escape from Blackmoor's fortress and set off to find others of his kind. During his journeys, Thrall visited the internment camps and found his once mighty race to be strangely cowed and lethargic. Having not found the proud warriors he had hoped to discover, Thrall set out to find the last undefeated orc chieftain, Grom Hellscream. Constantly hunted by the humans, Hellscream nevertheless held on to the Horde's unquenchable will to fight. Aided only by his own devoted Warsong clan, Hellscream continued to wage an underground war against the oppression of his beleaguered people. Unfortunately, Hellscream could never find a way to rouse the captured orcs from their stupor. The impressionable Thrall, inspired by Hellscream's idealism, developed a strong empathy for the Horde and its warrior traditions. Seeking the truth of his own origins, Thrall traveled north to find the legendary Frostwolf clan. Thrall learned that Gul'dan had exiled the Frostwolves during the early days of the First War. He also discovered that he was the son and heir of the orc hero Duratan, the true chieftain of the Frostwolves who had been murdered in the wilds nearly 20 years before. Under the tutelage of the venerable shaman Drekthar, Thrall studied his people's ancient shamanistic culture, which had been forgotten under Gul'dan's evil rule. Over time, Thrall became a powerful shaman and took his rightful place as chieftain of the exiled Frostwolves. Empowered by the elements themselves and driven to find his destiny, Thrall set off to free the captive clans and heal his race of demonic corruption. During his travels, Thrall found the aged war chief Orgrim Doomhammer, who had been living as a hermit for many years. Doomhammer, who had been a close friend of Thrall's father, decided to follow the young visionary orc and help him free the captive clans. Supported by many of the veteran chieftains, Thrall ultimately succeeded in revitalizing the Horde and giving his people a new spiritual identity. To symbolize his people's rebirth, Thrall returned to Blackmoor's fortress of Durnhold and put a decisive end to his former master's plans by laying siege to the internment camps. This victory was not without its price. During the liberation of one camp, Doomhammer fell in battle. Thrall took up Doomhammer's legendary warhammer and donned his black plate armor to become the new war chief of the Horde. During the following months, Thrall's small but volatile horde laid waste to the internment camps and stymied the Alliance's best efforts to counter his clever strategies. Encouraged by his friend and mentor, Grom Hellscream, Thrall worked to ensure that his people would never be slaves again. War of the Spider, Stormwind City, Scholomance, Scarlet Monastery, Stratholme. While Thrall was liberating his brethren in Lordaeron, Ner'zhul continued to build up his power base in Northrend. A great citadel was erected above the ice-crowned glaciers and manned by the growing legions of the dead. Yet as the Lich King extended his influence over the land, one shadowy empire stood against his power. The ancient subterranean kingdom of Osjal Nerub, which had been founded by a race of sinister humanoid spiders, sent their elite warrior guard to attack Icecrowned and end the Lich King's mad bid for dominance. Much to his frustration, Ner'zhul found that the evil Nerubians were immune not only to the plague, but to his telepathic domination as well. The Nerubian Spider Lords commanded vast forces and had an underground network that stretched nearly half the breadth of Northrend. Their hit-and-run tactics on the Lich King's stronghold stymied his efforts to root them out time after time. Ultimately, Ner'zhul's war against the Nerubians was won by attrition. With the aid of the sinister Dreadlords and innumerable undead warriors, the Lich King invaded Osjal Nerub and brought its subterranean temples crashing down upon the Spider Lords' heads. Though the Nerubians were immune to his plague, Ner'zhul's growing necromantic powers allowed him to raise the Spider Warriors' corpses and bend them to his will. As a testament to their tenacity and fearlessness, Ner'zhul adopted the Nerubians' distinctive architectural style for his own fortress and structures. Left to rule his kingdom unopposed, the Lich King began preparing for his true mission in the world. Reaching out into the human lands with his vast consciousness, the Lich King called out to any dark soul that would listen. Kel'Thuzad and the Forming of the Scourge, Hillsbrad Foothills, Scarlet Monastery, Scholomance, Undercity, Stratholme. There were a handful of powerful individuals scattered throughout the world who heard the Lich King's mental summons from Northrend. Most notable of them was the Archmage of Dalaran, Kel'Thuzad, who was one of the senior members of the Kirin Tor, Dalaran's ruling council. He had been considered a maverick for years due to his insistence on studying the forbidden arts of necromancy. Driven to learn all he could of the magical world and its shadowy wonders, he was frustrated by what he saw as his peers' outmoded and unimaginative precepts. Upon hearing the powerful summons from Northrend, The Archmage bent all his considerable will to communing with the mysterious voice. Convinced that the Crendor was too squeamish to seize the power and knowledge inherent in the dark arts, he resigned himself to learn what he could from the immensely powerful Lich King. Leaving behind his fortune and prestigious political standing, Kel'Thuzad abandoned the ways of the Crendor and left Dalaran forever. Prodded by the Lich King's persistent voice in his mind, he sold his vast holdings and stored away his fortunes. Traveling alone over many leagues of both land and sea, he finally reached the frozen shores of Northrend. Intent on reaching Icecrown and offering his services to the Lich King, the Archmage passed through the ravaged, war-torn ruins of Azjal-Nerub. Kel'Thuzad saw firsthand the scope and ferocity of Ner'zhul's power. He began to realize that allying himself with the mysterious Lich King might be both wise and potentially fruitful. After long months of trekking through the harsh Arctic wastelands, Kel'Thuzad finally reached the dark glacier of Icecrown. He boldly approached Ner'zhul's dark citadel and was shocked when the undead guardsmen silently let him pass as though he was expected. Kel'Thuzad descended deep into the cold earth and found his way down to the bottom of the glacier. There, in the endless cavern of ice and shadows, he prostrated himself before the frozen throne and offered his soul to the Dark Lord of the Dead. The Lich King was pleased with his latest conscript. He promised Kel'Thuzad immortality and great power in exchange for his loyalty and obedience. Eager for dark knowledge and power, Kel'Thuzad accepted his first great mission, to go into the world of men and found a new religion that would worship the Lich King as a god. To help the Archmage accomplish his mission, Ner'zhul left Kel'Thuzad's humanity intact. The aged yet still charismatic wizard was charged with using his powers of illusion and persuasion to lull the downtrodden, disenfranchised masses of Lordaeron into a state of trust and belief. Then, once he had their attention, he would offer them a new vision of what society could be, and a new figurehead to call their king. Kel'Thuzad returned to Lordaeron in disguise, and over the span of 3 years, he used his fortune and intellect to gather a clandestine brotherhood of like-minded men and women. The Brotherhood, which he called the Cult of the Damned, promised its acolytes social equality and eternal life on Azeroth in exchange for their service and obedience to Ner'zhul. As the months passed, Kel'Thuzad found many eager volunteers for his new cult amongst the tired, overburdened laborers of Lordaeron. It was surprisingly easy for Kel'Thuzad to achieve his goal, namely, to transfer the citizens' faith in the holy light into belief in Ner'zhul's dark shadow. As the Cult of the Damned grew in size and influence, Kel'Thuzad made sure to hide its workings from the authorities of Lordaeron. With Kel'Thuzad's success in Lordaeron, the Lich King made the final preparations for his assault against human civilization. Placing his plague energies into a number of portable artifacts called plague cauldrons, Ner'zhul ordered Kel'Thuzad to transport the cauldrons to Lordaeron, where they would be hidden within various cult-controlled villages. The cauldrons, protected by the loyal cultists, would then act as a plague generator, sending plagues seeping out across the unsuspecting farmlands and cities of northern Lordaeron. The Lich King's plan worked perfectly. Many of Lordaeron's northern villages were contaminated almost immediately. Just as in Northrend, the citizens who contracted the plague died and arose as the Lich King's willing slaves. The cultists under Kel'Thuzad were eager to die and be raised again in the Dark Lord's service. They exulted in the prospect of immortality through undeath. As the plague spread, more and more feral zombies arose in the Northlands. Kel'Thuzad looked upon the Lich King's growing army and named it the Scourge, for soon it would march upon the gates of Lordaeron and scour humanity from the face of the world. The Alliance splinters. History of Warcraft. Unaware of the death cults forming in their lands, the leaders of the Alliance nations began to bicker and argue over territorial holdings and decreasing political influence. King Tyrannus of Lordaeron began to suspect that the fragile pact they had forged during the Darkest Hour would not last for much longer. Tyrannus had convinced the Alliance leaders to lend money and laborers to help rebuild the southern kingdom of Stormwind, which had been destroyed during the Orcish occupation of Azeroth. The higher taxes that resulted, along with the high expense of maintaining and operating the numerous Orc internment camps, led many leaders, Genn Greymane of Gilneas in particular, to believe that their kingdoms would be better off seceding from the Alliance. To make matters worse, the High Elves of Silvermoon brusquely rescinded their allegiance to the Alliance, stating that the humans' poor leadership had led to the burning of their forests during the Second War. Tyrannus fought back his impatience and quietly reminded the elves that nothing of Kel'Thalas would have remained if not for the hundreds of valiant humans who'd given their lives to defend it. Nonetheless, the elves stubbornly decided to go their own way. In the wake of the elves' departure, Gilneas and Stromgarde seceded as well. Though the alliance was falling apart, King Tyrannus still had allies that he could count on. Both Admiral Proudmoore of Kulturas and the young king, Varian Rin of Azeroth, remain committed to the Alliance. Furthermore, the Wizards of the Crendor, led by Archmage Anthonidas, pledged Dalaran's steadfast support to Taranis' rule. Perhaps most reassuring of all was the pledge of the mighty Dwarven King, Magni Bronzebeard, who vowed that the Dwarves of Ironforge would forever owe a debt of honor to the Alliance for liberating Cosmodan from the Horde's control. And that'll do it for chapters 3 and 4. So thank you everybody for listening or watching. Make sure to give the video a like. And if you want more lore, I'll put some videos up on the screen. Either chapters 1 and 2 will be there, or if this is a few weeks after and I've recorded chapter 5, I'll put that up there as well. I'll also put it down in the description. Okay? Okay. See you.